You are now tuned into the Leader's Lens podcast.
Seth, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing incredible, man. I'm blessed. I'm here with the man of stone himself, Seth Steinman, talking about one of my favorite topics in leadership development, radical candor. So hard to have a bad day under those situations.
Absolutely, I love it.
And we want this to be an engaging chat. So throughout the session, as we're talking with Seth, if you have questions, put them in the chat. If things are resonating with you, we love to hear about those as well. We want this to be an interactive conversation, but we also want to make sure this is a great return on investment for your time. You know, all of your time is very valuable. So we want to make sure the things that we are speaking about are most relevant to you. And by being engaged throughout the conversation, that helps us out a ton. And to get the conversation started, here's a question for the group. And feel free to leave this emoji in the comments so we know what yours answer is. But what is your most used emoji? What is the emoji used more than any? Seth, do you have an answer? Are you an emoji guy? Is this something that you're throwing in conversations?
I'm a huge emoji guy. My favorite is actually the Kool-Aid man. He's like coming through the wall.
I love that.
Most of our wins. That's how we react.
So that's celebrating a win. When you have a win in your channel and they see the Kool-Aid man, they know that's excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. We're all excited. Yeah, wins are shared widely.
Well, Electric has a lot of wins to celebrate right now. So that's a big deal for sure. My most used emoji, and I'm excited to start seeing some pop up in the chat here as well. It's probably it's a similar reason I'll use it, but the graph up. Like if we're killing it right now, like I'm gonna put the graph showing that trends are going incredible. You got that hockey stick look to the graph, which is fun to feel the wins. It's fun to see the progress. But also the laughing emoji. Like if something's hilarious, I'm gonna drop a few laughing emojis as a reply. Bria put the eye roll emoji being her most used. That's an awesome one as well. Sometimes, you have those days, you have those interactions where the eye roll emoji is just the appropriate one. And I'm sure we'll start seeing a few other answers popping up in the chat here. But before we get started talking about the topic of the day, which is radical candor, I want to shout out our sponsors. First, Partner Hero. They custom build a team to match your culture, your customer, and your business needs. Then layer on training tools, customer insights, and more, so your operations scale with quality and efficiency. If you're a founder, making your life easier is always the goal. This is a great way to save your time. But also Electric. And we have Seth Steinman here, who is a senior director of growth at Electric. But over 900 companies right now use Electric managed services to level up their IT strategies, reduce operational costs, and free up valuable time. That is a big deal. Freeing up time is always worth the investment. So Seth, we are just incredibly thrilled to have you. And let me share just a little bit with the audience so they know why it's crucial that they stay engaged and listen to this conversation, know how much they can learn from you. So Seth has led growth on demand gen and SDR teams at business to business and SaaS companies and agencies for the last 10 plus years. So a wealth of experience to speak about. He's currently senior director of growth at Electric, and he has helped Electric grow from a Series B company, single-digit ARR, to $1 billion employees, over 1,000 people. That's a lot. That's a lot on your resume there, Seth, and we're just thrilled to get to know you. And when we spoke last week, you talked about how crucial radical candor was in creating this shift in the culture. Radical candor, how would you introduce a topic, and how has it been helpful for you in growing this business?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that intro, Jacob. Radical candor is from Kim Scott, and the foundation is care personally and challenge directly. So you can think of it as like an axis, and it's essentially the fact that you don't have to choose between being like a jerk on one side and a pushover on the other. So it's a framework for overall management philosophy, for hard conversations, for everyday meetings. And just enables you to kind of build a team, a culture, a company, collaborate together on results, and kind of what business is all about. So it's been really, really helpful framework for me.
I love it. Why do you think it's important for businesses?
That's what business is all about, right? Businesses are a collection of humans trying to get stuff done, and this is a way where you can enjoy going to work, knowing your colleagues personally, caring about them personally, but also challenging them to, be better, to improve, to get more for the business.
I love it. And so we had talked about how previously this wasn't really an approach that you took to leadership, but it had an impact. So I'm curious to hear, what was the difference that you saw in how you acted, but then also the results that you got as you became familiar with this framework of radical candor, which is caring personally and challenging directly. What were some of the differences you saw first in how you approached leadership, but then also the outcomes that you saw from your people?
Well, I'll tell you what my big aha moment was. I was working on the agency side, and I had to fire an intern who was, wonderful, but just really, something shifted and he really started underperforming. And those are always really hard conversations, hard decisions. And I remember him making a comment about how he was taken aback or surprised that we were firing him. And I was like, shit, that means that I did not do my job as a manager. If someone's surprised that they're getting fired, you failed as a manager. And that's when I was let me spend more time thinking about leadership and management. And when I realized that it's not an either or, you can care personally about humans while also challenging them on, being more effective, being better. And actually you're doing them a favor by doing that. You're doing a disservice if you're not really honest and transparent and forthcoming with your employees.
Yeah, a way that I think about it is we challenge them directly because we care about them. We understand,
Totally.
in the moment, there's going to be this conversation that's going to be a little bit awkward because we're recognizing a gap that this person has, but we're doing it because we realize this person hasn't met their potential yet, and they have growth, and they're going to be better because of the feedback we got. And an analogy I use when I'm talking to people about this sometimes is, if I have broccoli in my teeth, don't let me walk around at a networking event with broccoli in my teeth. Tell me that it's there. It might be a little awkward in the moment, but I'm going to be so grateful that somebody stepped up to acknowledge this, because I would have just been, humiliated throughout the day walking around with a piece of food stuck in my teeth.
I love that. And I would even add that just having this as an agreed upon framework enables me to be less awkward with that conversation. I'm like, Jacob, I care about you personally. So I'm gonna just so you know, you got broccoli in your teeth, versus how do you go up and say, the people when get zippers unzipped and they kind of do some awkward, I'm like, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't even feel comfortable kind of sharing it. So that's the other piece, is that not only is it good for you to remember, but it makes the conversations easier when you have this agreed upon team framework.
100%. So for you personally, was the challenging directly part the more challenging component of it, or was it showing the team that you cared about them personally? Was there one or the other that you realized I need to kind of step it up in this category?
And it was the challenging directly, I would say. I always have challenged. I did not have a good framework in which to do it in a kind of respectful way. So for me, it's less these things always made sense to me and I've always practiced them, but the combination and then being able to talk about it in the framework is really what enabled me to, I think, be successful and why I love it so much.
I love it. And if you're in the chat, don't forget, we want your questions. If you have thoughts, if you have ideas, leave them in the chat. And I'd love to just hear from the group. If you are not at all familiar with radical candor, put a 0. If you're somewhat familiar, put a 1. And if you're extremely familiar with the idea of radical candor, put a 2 in the chat. That'll give us a basis of just understanding the familiarity in the group. And so Seth, here's another question. So how do you balance the need for candor but also maintain positive relationships within your team. Because I feel like sometimes that's the fear, is if I'm critical of people, they're not going to want to talk to me about it. They're not going to have a relationship with me. They're going to be less likely to want to approach me and maybe see me as unapproachable. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, I think very essential. Like, as you mentioned, it's really hard to be candid if you don't have kind of that baseline of caring personally and then them knowing you care personally, right? So, I am very intentional about asking about pets, remembering kids' birthdays, remembering kids' names, like asking about vacations, wanting pictures, because that enables us to have some of those hard conversations. Kim actually gave in the book an example where she kind of crushed it on a project at Google. Her boss is Sheryl Sandberg, who many people probably know, went into Cheryl's office and she was like, look, that was good, but you said a lot. And she said, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but she said something like, you're one of the smartest people I know, and that makes you sound stupid. And then she offered to have like a speech coach. And if you just think about telling a brand new employee at your company, like, you sound stupid, it would not go over well, right? It wouldn't be productive. But having that baseline of caring enables you to kind of give that very honest feedback.
That's great. And like when we invest in our team, we invest in the people around us, it's a lot easier to have that constructive feedback and they're going to be more open to it. I feel like a misstep a lot of managers and leaders make is their first conversation is piece of criticism. And if that's how you're opening up the relationship, like, it's natural the person you're speaking to is going to have the instinct of putting the walls up, getting defensive, and just not being open or receptive to hearing that. But when you establish the fact that I care about you as a person, I want you to be successful, that's why I'm giving you this feedback, it allows you to be direct and for it to be, and the person you're giving feedback to assume the best intentions, and you're doing this because you care.
100%.
And I think the other piece that I like about that story, and I love that you brought this story up, is how direct Sheryl Sandberg had to be in giving this feedback. Because if she was like, you probably should, stop saying, you don't know how the person on your team is going to interpret that message. They might leave with like, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. But when you're intentional and you explain the impact of when you do this, you look dumb. You need to stop doing it. It's a much different conversation. And that's why I like the approach of radical candor so much more than like the sandwich method of feedback, which is like, show them you care, give feedback, then show them you care. In that message of feedback gets lost every single time. Like the person leaves that conversation and feeling like, I'm doing fine. Like there was some feedback, but I don't need to worry about that. Things are good. The radical candor approach is different because they're very specific on, we need you to change. You're holding yourself back and the team back if you don't make these changes.
Yeah. And as a leader, I think too, like from Cheryl's perspective, it is so much easier to just say, you did a great job. Here's a cookie. Like that is the easiest, that is by far the easiest route.
Yeah.
So it shows, that she cares. And I think it takes a while for us leaders to like appreciate that. And it takes just a while in the job to say like, wow, that was the harder call and the best route for like Kim's career too.
I love it. And again, I'll remind in the chat, we love to see your questions. If things we're saying are resonated, we love to see your comments as well. It definitely helps us make sure that we're talking about the right angle within the world of radical candor. And in your experience, Seth, how does radical candor lead to improved performance within individuals on a team, but also within the team as a whole?
Yeah, I think the most important part is that it helps create like a safe place for everybody. And that's crucial for performance. People need to feel that. And then also it creates a sense of like collaboration and the fact that like we have each other's back. We actually, this week we're in a team meeting and we're like this is going to be like a little marketing niche. So I'll keep this quick, but it's like, which team gets attribution, which team gets credit for this op. And someone actually was like, look, this is gray. Like, I'm going to give it to you. And for me as like a manager, I'm like, damn, I love that. Like that is like a sign that this team trusts each other, that we like each other, and that this is like a safe place. So that's what's probably the most important part. And then there's of course, being able challenge directly enables you to be more productive, for us to find opportunities and talk about them openly and honestly.
That's beautiful. It's awesome seeing that it's so part of the culture now that like you're seeing these things come to life in a team meeting where sometimes people are very reserved. They don't want to speak up, but like you've created this culture where people understand this is just part of what we do. This is part of what makes us great at Electric. So you love hearing those outcomes.
Another part of Radical Candor, which I have like somewhat overlooked, but she talks about rock stars versus superstars. And what that means is you have rock stars who are like solid performers, like a rock, right? And they're essential. But they have like a ton of stuff outside of work, and maybe they're just not trying to like stretch on every project. And then you have the superstars, which are like the forces for change within your company. They're super ambitious at work. They're always looking for new opportunities, and they're not mutually exclusive, and people can change from one to the other. Like I have like a 13-month-old son at home. Like I have been much more of a rock star since he's been born. So that can change, within time.
Awesome. We have a great question here from Bria Waller. Thank you, Bria, for bringing this up. So question, Seth, how do you use Radical Candor with employees that take things extremely personal? Because I feel like we all have those people that we work with that even the smallest bit of criticism, we just don't know how they're going to react. How do you approach that sort of a situation?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest. So Kim Scott calls this ruinous empathy on her kind of axis. It's when you care personally, but you're not able to challenge directly, either because either you as a manager or the people don't enable it. For me to remember, it's like that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the employee. It doesn't help people like us as managers. It doesn't help the company. But it's hard. It's a hard situation. Like so there's a couple things. So one, what you can sometimes do is actually give the Radical Candor like within a win. So Shel Silberg, the example we talked about, was a little probably harsh if you have an employee that takes things personally, but you can give feedback after like a really good event or like after they hit a number, be like, that's awesome. Like, but if you thought about if you did this one thing, maybe you would have hit 120%. So that's like sometimes a good place to start. The other thing I think about is the method of communication. So if face-to-face, even like a virtual face-to-face is hard or they take things personally, maybe it's within like a Slack or an email, or like there's tools like Simple Improvements and 7use where you can give feedback, which may help as well.
That's perfect. I love it. And I think something to remember as a leader is like you never want somebody being fired to be a surprise. And if we don't provide feedback, we kind of put ourselves in a box where that's the only situation, because we have this person that's struggling, they're not hitting their goals, they're probably maybe not following up with deadlines that impact other people on your team. And if you're not holding people accountable, like it's just going to destroy your team culture. So you're going to end up in a place where this person's damaged. So you kind of leave yourself with no other option but to let them go. And by providing Radical Candor, you can prevent that. You can give them the option of like, hey, these are the changes we need you to make. And now you're kind of putting the ball in their court, because it's up to them to make the changes. You set the expectations of what this role requires, and now it's up to them to make them accountable. It's not your decision. Like you set the expectations, there were clear expectations, and they did it or they didn't. So I think that's just like one piece I would add to that component, and another reason why I think Radical Candor is just such an incredible tool.
Absolutely. But you saw Sam on the team join the chat. Hey, Sam.
What up, Sam? Sam Hunter, appreciate you joining. She's on the Electric Squad, it sounds like.
Yeah, she cares personally, it sounds like. I didn't even show her with the team. She must have thought on LinkedIn.
I love it. Yeah, just showing up, right? That's a way to show that you care, 100%. Can you share an example of how you've used Radical Candor? Maybe a specific situation on your team that was challenging, but Radical Candor helped you work past the obstacle?
Yeah, we actually had one just this month. So super top of mind. We had a sales development rep, so entry-level sales. usually, first or second job out of college. And when he's on his game, he absolutely crushes it. But performance had really fallen off in Q4. And, like, we're pretty transparent. We have like public dashboards and metrics. I share stuff with exec on a monthly basis. Performance had been lacking. It was showing in the numbers. I know he was having some like kind of issues outside of the office. So, we had a conversation at the end of Q4 and used the radical candor framework. Like, look, I care about you personally. I totally understand things are going on. Like, when you're on, you crush it. Like, what can I do to help? We've met, a few different times, and actually we just finished up closed out February, and he was actually the top SDR for a number of ops graded. So that's been like a big win.
So was there specific feedback in that? Like, do you feel like, or was it more problem solving, collaboration on the problem? I'm always curious how different managers and leaders address that.
Yeah, I try to keep things as open-ended as possible to start. Like, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Like, talk to me, right? Like, when you're on it, you crush it. Like, look at these other months where you were number one. Like, what's going on, And then like, let's work on it together. There was some very like practical, like we got together, like super in the weeds, but like one example is like he was getting just a ton of emails that weren't necessary for his day to day, and it was like overwhelming the inbox, and he was kind of just caused him to feel like overwhelmed, right? And so we like set up filters, got it cleaned up. We declared like email bankruptcy for any emails that were more than 2 months old, and just like got it back to like a really good square one, and then he took it from there. But a lot of it's like, he knows what he needs to do. It's just, hey, I'm here, I care about you, and I'm paying attention, and other people are too. So like, that's the radical candor part. That's the like, look, if this continues on this road, like they all like, there's only one kind of end solution, and it's up to him to turn around, and kudos to him. He absolutely did.
Yeah. The other takeaway I'm hearing in this story is the fact that you're paying attention because you're invested in this person. Like, you're not like out to get them. You're not trying to like find every mistake they're making because you have some agenda against them. It's just, hey, I'm paying attention. I want you to do well. I'm noticing these things that you're excelling at. I see these strengths and the value that you bring, but there's also this thing that we need you to change, right? And I think just like that package in feedback is just so productive. And I think to Bria's question earlier, it helps take the defenses down, where some people might have only worked for managers in the past who only spoke with them when it was time to give feedback. And just taking that approach is an easy way to separate yourself. And the other thing is, like, I talk about this a lot. So if you follow me on like social media, you've probably heard me say it, but like some people wake up on empty. Like, they wake up, no self-esteem. They don't come from a place where people are encouraging them to be better, or people are investing in them and recognizing the value they bring. And so if they come from their home life to work with that, and the first thing they hear is like, here's all the things you're doing wrong, like, it's no wonder they're going to feel defeated and not want to show up the next day. But if we take that time to just invest in them and build them up, I think the world of difference, not just at the work experience, but they take that energy home with them as well. And I love hearing that you have that approach with your team, Seth.
Yeah, I love that too. The other thing I'll say is, even as managers, like, we should be asking proactively for feedback as well. And having it as like a two-way street can sometimes create that trust as well.
Awesome. How do you establish that as part of your culture? I do feel like, I think every leader would say, I'm open to feedback, but not every leader is actually open to feedback. So how do you establish that as part of your culture? What have you learned?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it. So the first is creating like processes where, we're encouraging it, right? So at the end of every quarter, like sending out a quick survey that's just anonymous, and it's like, yo, what's one thing I can do better? Like, just open text, anonymous, boom. At the end of all of we have twice a year reviews, and the last question is like, what's one thing I can do better as a manager to like help you? So that's the first, having like the processes in place. And then the second is, when you do get the feedback, recognizing it, appreciating it, hearing it, and acting on it, because that's how that's how people, feel comfortable kind of giving more.
Absolutely. If your first instinct when you get feedback is to get defensive or to shift the feedback, and then like, well, the reason I do this is because you do this, the person's not going to want to continue giving feedback because the feeling is like, why am I like going out of my way to give my boss feedback that's going to help his team, or I feel he's going to help his team, if every time I do that, he's getting defensive. And then on the other side of it, which I love that you called out, is like we've kind of set the example of what it looks like to receive feedback for our team. And so if we're open to it, it's going to be a lot more likely that the people on our team are as well. That's beautiful. And as you're thinking of, beyond yourself and you're on your team, but creating change at an organization, what have you learned about helping people be onboarded to this sort of methodology in both giving and receiving feedback?
Yeah, I think just early on, establishing it as your culture is huge. And it's also the future. Like we are now virtual companies in most cases, and it requires kind of like an effort in many cases there's no, water cooler, if you will. You need to create those opportunities to gain trust and care personally.
Awesome. I love that you're at Electric. You've already created those systems and established processes of here's the times that we're gonna be proactive in reaching out and getting feedback from our team, because especially working from home and hybrid, you don't have those just casual interactions where someone might bump into you and it leads to a conversation. So you really do have to create that as part of how your company runs. So great call out there. And then Bree adds, I naturally use radical candor, but have received feedback from ownership that they find that as a weakness in my leadership. How do you explain that to upline so they can find value? Then she added, maybe it's not just something they understand my first time ever being told that's a weakness. So I think if I understand this correctly, she feels that her approach of showing people that she cares about them is actually a weakness, and it's not showing she's a strong leader in her organization. Do you have any thoughts around that sort of a dynamic? Not sure if you've seen that in the past. Kind of putting you on the spot here.
No, I don't know. I appreciate it. This is where I think having like a named framework really helps. Like it's one thing, like we can all kind of, I think, agree with the overall idea of like, yes, care personally so you can challenge directly, right? Like, but having it as the named framework, I think is half the value, because now you can like go to your management or your ownership and say, like, this is one of the philosophies, or, say like, hey, I was just on a LinkedIn Live with like Meter Lens, and we were talking about radical candor, and this is something that, makes sense to me. It's something that I want to like propose. It sounds like you've had some conversations about your leadership style, so I would use that as an opening. Like, what do you think if I, really just embrace this radical candor? These are the two components of it. And caring personally is literally half of it, and then go from there. But I think this gives you an opportunity to address it directly. And that's the radical candor part, right? That's the part of challenging directly to ownership, like up the chain, of what part do you disagree with? What part do you have feedback on? What part can I do better? But I don't think anyone should fault you for caring personally. That's for sure. If it stops you from challenging directly, that can be an issue, but like, let's narrow down where the feedback lies.
Absolutely. Do you remember what it was at Electric about radical candor or about the what you were seeing in your organization that helped you understand, like, we need this? This is something that's going to help us get better. I'm not sure if how long ago it was, but do you remember why you realized that shift? What helped you realize that shift was needed?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, the aha moment, like I said, was like agency. Like that was probably 8 years ago, where I was like, I need to find a better philosophy, to become a better manager, a better leader. And this just has made like a lot of sense to me. And I'll credit you, my CMO at a previous company and here prior, Andrea, she really embraces it as well. And so having that has really helped.
Has it been an organic rollout where it's you setting the example and then talking to people individually as you're mentoring different leaders throughout the company? Or was there more of an established cadence on how this rolled out at Electric?
At Electric, pretty natural. But at our previous company, actually, we sent we had a book club, and literally this was the book we sent, free to employees. Like, let's read this together. Let's talk about it. Like, do we all agree? And I think it depends where your culture's at. If this seems like a kind of like mild shift that you could talk about and I'll get behind, I think, just talking about it in like an offsite or OKRs or reviews makes a lot of sense. If you're have like if your culture is really struggling, and it seems like a big shift, I think having it actually as like a book where you can, talk about each chapter and talk about what you agree with is kind of might be necessary. And I think it's the best way to reset a culture.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a big deal. One activity they have in the book is they actually recommend that you meet with your direct reports and you ask them, the last conversation that we had, where does it fit on this quadrant? Like, did I care personally but not challenge you directly? Did I challenge you directly but not show that I cared personally? Did I do both? And allow them to tell you where the conversation landed, which is just a great tool in creating self-awareness where you can understand where your gaps are. And you might be aligned, but you also might be completely missing the mark. And it also kind of sets the tone that, hey, I'm open to feedback. Like, even it might be something new for you. Your team might not be used to you asking them for feedback, but it at least shows them that, hey, this person's making an effort. They're not feeling like feedback is a one-way road, because that can get exhausting.
Totally.
And then Bria adds, "You're the bomb, Seth." So she appreciated your guidance there. We appreciate the question, and I'll open it up again. Anybody in the chat, if you have a question about radical candor or leadership in general, we love to see them and make sure this is as a valuable use of your time. How about across the organization? So you're not necessarily working with your direct reports, but you're working with your peers. How have you seen radical candor different, but also useful in that sort of a relationship?
I think it's even more important across teams, and especially now we are moving faster than ever across organizations as we roll out, new products, as we all work asynchronously, remotely, and having that trust across teams to collaborate and being able to hold each other accountable to roadmaps, to goals. It's critical if we are going to be successful, in these next few years.
I love it. That's a big deal. And Electric is just crushing it. Like, your clients love you. You're simplifying IT for so many different companies. What's the secret to the success outside of radical candor? What have you learned just about organizational health in these last few years working with such a big and successful company?
It's a good question. I mean, look, you need to work with smart people that you care about on like a big, hairy, problem that's really important. It's kind of what I found in a nutshell. And, we're fortunate to have all of those pieces here at Electric for sure. The thing I'll add to Jacob, just because I know earlier a couple of people gave like zeros and ones in terms of like their familiarity with radical candor, is that, it's a framework, and you're not going to get it right every time, and that's okay. And it takes time, as all change does. And, every step you can take, I think is important and has incremental value.
Beautiful. I love that. Like, recognizing just the small wins, every step has value. There's always going to be a million problems you have to solve. Like, you're always going to feel overwhelmed when you're an ambitious person and you're in an ambitious environment. But that should be motivation to work even harder to recognize the small wins, because you need them as a leader for sure. Like, you need to see that so you're not getting burnt out, but your team needs it as well, right? They need to see that even though things can seem really big, there's so many problems, and we're sometimes building the ship as we're flying it, or wherever, however that saying goes. Like there still are a lot of things going well. We're making progress, and it's just fun to look back sometimes and just recognize the benefits and the value of the hard work that you've put in, and not feel like it's just constantly like, things are constantly happening that can seem too big to manage at times.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about, not everyone like kind of people wake up on empty, and not everyone has that source of like external, like positive reinforcement. I don't know if Kim talks about this in the book, but you should also think about radical candor, like in a mirror, like about yourself, like care personally about yourself, like your own mental health, like your own, your own well-being, your own team. And then, what are there opportunities to do better? And maybe that means, giving yourself more time, or maybe it means, focusing on different projects you enjoy more. That can sometimes be hard as managers or as leaders, but it's no less important, that's for sure.
I love that. Yeah, like don't make you an option, because I think to your point, like even building off it, maybe I'll take it a step further. It might be impossible to care about other people if you don't first care about yourself. Like I don't even know if you can do that genuinely and authentically. You can do the things and like try to show up, but without like taking time for you to be at your best, it's going to be impossible to be at your best for your team. And especially if you're leading through change and that's the season of life that you're in, like you have to be pretty disciplined to make sure like I'm going to block out this 30, 45 minutes, whatever it is, to do something for me, because I know I need it to refresh and re-energize. And I know if I do this thing, I'll be better throughout the rest of my day and my week. So no, I feel like this conversation is not complete without you bringing that up, Seth. So thank you for bringing that up. What is your thing? Do you have a thing that for you is, I know if I do this, I'm going to be at my best for my team?
I have like a 5-minute journal that I try to do every morning. And I know that if I am able to do that, it's just like, it's kind of like things you're grateful for. That really sets me up, for success. Trying to get outside too, and like go for a run or taking the dog for a walk, or my son like for a walk, that really helps as well. But it's been like snowy or even worse, like ice rain here. So, apologies to the team, because I have not gotten out in the last few days to do that.
So for the last year, I started a nonprofit in my city of Salem, Oregon. So I was out all the time. I was connecting with people. We were going to meetings. Sometimes we would make our meeting walking so we could just stretch our legs. But about 4 weeks ago, I joined the Work Week team. I've had a newsletter here since last August, but I joined full time as the director of creator success. And I'm already seeing myself like getting into some of these habits where I'm just like at my desk from 6:30 to like 2:00. And so I'm already like, all right, I need to make some changes here, because this is not going to be a sustainable path at all. So it takes discipline. It's always, I think everybody understands the value of it, but actually executing on that is a much different conversation.
Absolutely. What's your nonprofit? I love that, Jake.
So it was called the McLaren Leadership Foundation. And so we were focused on building community leaders in Salem. We had programs for young professionals. We had a few community leadership cohorts that were a ton of fun. And fortunately, I was able to pass it on to somebody else I know is going to do an incredible job. And we built it as a partnership within our local Salem area Chamber of Commerce. So it kind of fit underneath that umbrella. So we had some good support there, which helped to get launched as well. So good times.
That's
good
awesome.
times for sure.
I love that.
I'm curious to learn more about the journal. Do you have certain prompts that you use? Is it just kind of whatever you feel like writing about for that 5 minutes, or what's been your process there?
Yeah, I think it's actually called the 5-minute journal. Yeah, it's called the 5-minute journal. I really, really recommend it. There's a few prompts. The one that I use, so it starts every day with like a quote up top, some kind of like inspirational quote to think about. And then it says like 3 things you're grateful for, what would make today great, and then a couple of daily like affirmations as well. And then there's kind of nighttime ones, which I think it's like a little ambitious for me. So I generally do those top 3. But the what would make today great is surprisingly helpful. where I will, really think, and it's like, wow, that would be like a great day. And then it's like halfway through, you're like, oh, what do I do? And it's like, all right, like already said like going for a run would make today great. Or sometimes it's like going to a coffee shop and getting like, there's this one place that has this like chocolate chip muffin that they like toast with butter. And I'm like, just, if it's like a rainy day, I'll like throw that on there because it's like, yes, like it's so easy to I'll just sit inside all day. But going to work for an hour and getting up, like that does make the day great,
I love it. That's such an easy question that I think it's easy to miss as well when we feel things are just rough and we're going through a tough season, just challenging ourselves to ask, okay, what would make it better? And I think just like acknowledging the fact that there are things that will make it better, I can do those things to make my life better is powerful. And I love that habit of just every day asking yourself. Just that's beautiful. What was the name of the, you said the 5-minute journal?
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
awesome.
Again, you could even just Google it and it's the same kind of, like, they have different quote every day, but same prompts. You could even just write those prompts down too. Like you don't have to buy the actual journal.
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. I love it. Anything you want to add, Seth? I'm so grateful for your time. I know you're extremely busy, but we really appreciate you being here on the Leaders Lens podcast.
No, I appreciate it as well. If anyone, has questions, if you want to reach out, I'm happy to chat one-on-one, and hopefully you're able to take something away from here and incorporate into your own management leadership, make the team a little stronger, make the company a little stronger.
I love it. Yeah, we appreciate your time, and very grateful as well to have Electric as a supporter of this podcast series. It's been a big deal, and just having a company like yours that believes in the vision of Leaders Lens means a ton. So thank you for that. I've had so much fun doing these live episodes every 2 p.m. Eastern time every Thursday. I'm going to say that again. I've had so much fun doing the live episodes on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time that we're going to continue this trend. So catch us live. It's going to be a ton of fun. We'll absolutely have to bring Seth back on at some point. He's been an incredible guest. And like you said, if you have questions about radical candor or leadership, feel free to send him a message. Feel free to send me a message, or even leave it in the comments. We'll make sure we keep an eye on it, because being an effective leader is a big deal. You have a chance to completely change the lives of everybody on your team. So don't take that for granted. Seth, enjoy your day.
Thanks, Jacob. Bye, guys.
Do